Washington mornings on the Mall. 105.9 FM. And AM 630. WMAL.
7:07 on a Wednesday morning. Brian Neiman, Tori Clark from the former Pentagon spokesperson in the House this morning for Brian Wilson. Thanks for coming in, Tori.
Great to be here.
K.T. McFarland, Fox News national security analyst, joins us about a half hour from now. We'll talk to Scott Rasmussen at 8:06. We'll get his take on what's going on in the polls, especially now that Rick Santorum is out of the race. Right now, Blair Lee joins us, Maryland political analyst of the Lee Group in Silver Spring. He's the CEO, man who knows Maryland politics probably better than anybody else in the state these days. So, all right, there's a story in the AP this morning, Blair, that says that the governor is mum on whether or not he'll call a special session because of the doomsday budget that went down the other night. There's no way that Martin O'Malley, he has to call a special session, right? I mean, there's no choice in the matter.
Yeah, Brian, you're absolutely right. I mean, the governor right now is pouting, okay?
Okay.
He's angry at the Senate and the House for not passing some of his legislation. And what you had really was a game of chicken between the Senate President, Mike Miller, and the House Speaker, Mike Bush. Unfortunately, as the clock struck midnight Monday night, neither in this game of chicken blinked, and that's why we had the meltdown. The governor's upset. He is basically pouting, like I said, but there will be a special session because these are all Democrats. I mean, what's amazing is you're having this finger-pointing and blaming between the governor, the Senate President, and the House Speaker, and the comptroller is blaming everybody.
Right.
And these are all Democrats in a one-party state. What if we had a two-party state? Wouldn't that be amazing?
Well, here's the question, though, for you. All right, they're forced, if there is no special session, they're forced to cut over $500 million from the budget by July 1st, right? That has to be done, and those are real cuts.
Yeah, here's what happened, okay? The state constitution requires that the Assembly only pass one bill a year, and that is the state budget. The governor writes the budget, the Assembly deals with the budget, can reduce it, and then they pass the budget bill. They passed a budget. What they didn't pass, and what was part of this standoff between Miller and Bush, was a tax bill that was going to raise hundreds of millions of dollars of income taxes to help finance that budget, to balance that budget. So the default position is that automatically the so-called doomsday spending cuts are triggered because the income taxes were not there. That's what we're talking about. But Democrats, they don't, in their DNA, they cannot have spending cuts.
Right.
So they will have a special session. They will pass the income tax increase. The problem is that the income tax bill got caught up in this game of chicken between Miller and Bush on Miller's need or his top priority, which is a gambling bill. He wants to have another slots venue in Prince George's County. He wants to have table games for all 6 Maryland slots venues. That's his top priority. He was holding Bush's tax increase bill hostage in the Senate. Meanwhile, Bush was holding Miller's gambling bill hostage in the House. And when the clock struck midnight, neither bill passed.
All right. So let me back up for a second, because the governor has been pushing tax increases for several months now, and there have been Democrats, whether it's Mike Miller or Peter Franchot, the state comptroller, saying this is crazy. But I have a question to ask you. I mean, and I said this to Tori this morning. I go, just politically speaking, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, what person would think that it's smart politically to want to raise taxes on the gas tax, especially under the circumstance that we have now, where it's $4 a gallon? I mean, is the governor that dumb?
No, what you have going on here, Brian, is a separation in political interests between the Assembly and the governor. The governor is term limited. The governor cannot run again in 2014.
But he has national ambitions.
Exactly.
Oh, he did.
has a national agenda right now. He wants to look good to the environmentalists. He wants to look good to the labor unions. He wants to look good to the liberals in a Democratic primary for U.S. president in 2016. But the 188 Maryland lawmakers in Annapolis, they have to get reelected in 2014 here in Maryland. So they may be liberal, they may be tax and spend, but they're not suicidal. They didn't go along with the tax increase. But they've already passed a so-called flush tax. They're passing a so-called stormwater management requirement, which is going to be billions of dollars in local taxes. They are going to pass a huge income tax increase in a special session, and they're going to put the cost of teacher pension back on the counties, which is going to result in local tax increases to pay for the teacher pension liability. So, yes, tax and spend is alive and well in Maryland.
All right, but you say this would help him in a national or a primary in the Democrat. I mean, a significant amount of money. I mean, he's talking about a 6% sales tax on gasoline. We're at $4 a gallon. That's really going to help him. I mean, has this hurt his brand? I mean,
here's why. Okay, the labor unions, and don't forget, the big labor unions nowadays are the public employee unions. And when, for example, on Monday night, when the session stopped without the tax increase, the first person to speak up and to object was the head of the AFL-CIO here in Maryland. They want the tax increases because that's how they finance increases in public employee raises and benefits and all the rest. That's what the Democrats are all about, and the labor unions help reelect them every year. So O'Malley is playing to the labor unions largely here by calling for increased taxes.
I just wonder what the takeaway is, though, for the national perspective. I live in the People's Republic of Montgomery County, and if you're a Democratic politician in the state of Maryland, for years and years and years, you've been able to just raise taxes because we're like the frogs in the lukewarm water, and you just keep turning it up, and we'll just slowly die because of it. But I think maybe they finally hit the wall, and aren't people who are thinking about Democrats running down the road 4 or 8 years from now going to say, no, you can't do this. It can't be endless tax raising.
Here's what happened, Tori. In 2010, when the rest of the nation was going Tea Party and going red and electing a Tea Party Congress, Maryland went the opposite direction. They elected a Democratic sweep, okay? The governor, all of the statewide offices went Democratic. The assembly was overwhelmingly Democratic. And in Montgomery County, Prince George's County, Baltimore City, and Charles County, there is not one elected Republican. So the Democrats think they have a mandate. They basically say, look, the voters told us in 2010 they like tax and spend. Apparently, they're trying to find out where the outer limits of tax and spend are. But, Tori, you may be right. Look at the primary election that was held last Tuesday.
Right, Gargiola losing.
Yeah. Got wiped out by a dissident Democrat, a insider, an outsider Democrat. And I was talking to Doug Duncan, who was backing John Delaney in that race. And Duncan told me that John Delaney, who was the challenger to the insider establishment Democrat, Rob Garagiola, running for Congress in the 6th District, and Duncan told me they were going to Metro stops with Delaney, and people were asking one question. They were saying, are you in office now? Delaney would say no, and they would say good. So there may be some pushback.
Right.
I think, Victoria, you may be right. It may be they're finding the outer limits of tax and spend. Right. It's not sustainable, believe me.
I'll have a couple seconds, but did Peter Franchot have a come-to-Jesus moment? I mean, he was a liberal Democrat when he was in Montgomery County, and now he's talking about, hey, this is crazy to raise taxes.
You don't need polls in Maryland to find out what the popular sentiment is in this state. Just look at Franchot's most recent reincarnation. Franchot is running now as a moderate Democrat. He wants to be governor. He, like Tory, has figured out that the Democrats in power right now have gone too far, and he basically is trying to co-opt this whole centrist, common sense, pro-business, anti-tax position.
All right, Blair. Great to talk to you as always. Appreciate it very much.